it's Running for the Roses. Lucas and I are going to get into our Week 5 recap. We're going to do it through the lens of some very highly paid individuals, some very highly paid college football coaches who have received contract extensions in recent years. How are those programs faring 1, 2, 3 years into those contracts? Excuse me. We're going to start with Jimbo Fisher. We're going to start with Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M. The Aggies lose 26-20 to Alabama. Lucas, Jimbo Fisher gets paid $95 million. He signed a 10-year extension in September of 2021 following Texas A&M's Orange Bowl appearance in 2020. This is the tenure of Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M. 9-4 2018, 8-5 2019, 9-1 2020, won the Orange Bowl. 8-4 in 21, 5-7 in 2022. Texas A&M loses to Alabama this week, and here are some of the conservative decisions that Jimbo Fisher made during that game. He punted on 4th and 1 from Alabama's 45 late in the third quarter in a tie game. He punted again on 4th and 6 in Alabama's territory while trailing early in the fourth quarter. Kicked a field goal on 4th down and goal from the Alabama 2-yard line with a little more than 2 minutes left after using a timeout.
Yep. That was the biggest thing for me was the timeout. Yeah. Like when they clearly knew they were going to kick a field goal. But yeah, continue.
Well, I think the point being, and Jimbo is where we start because Jimbo has the most notable contract in the history of the sport, right? Jimbo has the contract that got him to A&M before the 2018 season that really reset the market for coaches. He had won a national championship at Florida State. He's only one of, I think, 4 current coaches to have won a national championship, right? It's Jimbo, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney, and Mac Brown, so 5. So there are 5 current coaches that have won a national championship. I get the move for A&M at the time. It was a big name, and you thought, if you gave him all what he needed, facility-wise, resource-wise, assistance, all this stuff, he was going to take you to where you wanted to go. And so far, Lucas, it just hasn't happened. I mean, you look at these are the SEC records for Texas A&M under Jimbo Fisher. 5-3, 4-4, 8-1 in 2020. 4-4, 2-6 last year. They're 2-1 this year. I mean, the 8 and 9 wins looks good, but when you're playing, UL Monroe and Nicholls State in the non-con, I mean, you look at the SEC record, 25-19 for a coach that makes almost $10 million a year. And I thought they had a really good chance to beat Alabama. It was a very competitive game, but this is also the worst Alabama in years. I mean, this is an Alabama team that looks like it's a 9-3 team. And with how poor the SEC is, they very well might get to 10 or 11 wins. But this was your shot for A&M, right? Like, you felt like this was your shot. And I know that Connor Wigman got injured. But you felt like you got Bama at home. Like, this could be your year to win the SEC West. And it doesn't look like that's going to be the case for Jimbo.
No, and the fact was, they were up 17-10 at halftime. And you're feeling fairly good. But then Alabama made some really, really nice halftime adjustments. I thought they were in Max Johnson's face, I thought, the entire second half. And my thing with Jimbo, too, was it just felt like they were just trying to run the same offense they had in the first half that Alabama clearly had adjusted to. They had no second counterpunch or second, third, or fourth option to try to go to, and they only scored 3 points in the second half. And like you mentioned, punting when you're deep in Alabama's territory, like when you're playing teams like this, man, you've got to at least take some risk, especially because I thought their defense was playing okay for most of the time, but they also allowed Jalen Monroe to get going. I thought Jalen Monroe had his best game as a starting quarterback at the FBS level. They forgot to cover Jermaine Burton numerous times. The dude almost had 200 yards receiving. Like you mentioned, this was your time to get Alabama, and you still couldn't. And now I think there's still more questions about A&M. Now they have a road game, next week going against Tennessee. And like we mentioned, the price tag, I think if you're an A&M fan, you can probably live most years winning 8 to 9 games. But when you're paying a guy $9.5 million a year, Oh, and by the way, this whole extension's fully guaranteed, so they could fire him today, and they'll still owe him $70 million on the rest of this contract.
77, Lucas. It's the second
77.
largest buyout in the FBS right now. $77,562,500 as of December 1st, 2023. So as of a couple months.
And I even can't even remember when they signed that deal. Was there a big opening or something that they were that fearful they were going to lose him to?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I don't think so. It would have been coaches starting in 2021. That was
Well,
not
yeah,
USC. It was not LSU.
no.
It was not Alabama. I mean, again, when you're making $9 million or whatever it was at the time, there are only several jobs you could take. Like you could even take. But like that's the point in all these extensions, right? Like one program comes sniffing around your coach, or your coach gets put on some list. Next thing you know, it's like, oh my god, we have to lock him up for 8 more years. Oh my god. We'll talk about PJ Fleck here soon. That's
uh,
that's the PJ Fleck rule right there.
so one good year you got to lock him up. But I mean, we saw this with Mel Tucker. Michigan State
Right?
has that magical season. They're afraid every school like LSU that year was going to poach him away, and they gave him kind of a similar contract. But anyway, it was a frustrating loss. I think the one thing with Texas A&M, you look at their season right now. You look at their two toughest games on the road at Miami and at home against Alabama, and they are 0-2 in both of those games. And like we said, you're paying Jimbo Fisher to at least win, I think, like half of these kind of toss up games. And right now, he's probably batting less than 200 when it comes to maybe some of these toss up games. But
Yeah, well, because real quick before we get to your first game, like college football, like when you're in A&M, you're set up to go at least 8 or 9 wins every year, right? You're going to have more talent. The way Jimbo's recruited, you're going to have more talent than 7, 8 teams every year. So it's how do you do in those 4 or 5 games when you're playing Alabama, you're playing LSU, you're playing Tennessee this week? Like, how do you do when your talent is very evenly matched? And with Jimbo's conservative, not even play calling, because he's not calling the plays anymore, but his conservative decision making, like you just wonder, like when you're punting on 4th and 3 from the opponent's 42-yard line every single time, like what good does having Evan Stewart and Anaya Smith
mm-hmm.
have, or Ruben Owens, or like all of these really good playmakers that Texas A&M has? So I don't know what the future holds for Jimbo. Like I don't know. I think Brian Kelly will keep having success at LSU. Nick Saban is Nick Saban. Lane Kiffin seems to be a thorn in everyone's side. Ole Miss could be really good this year. They won again this week over Arkansas. So it seems like Texas A&M is paying a coach almost $100 million to just be a middle of the road SEC West team, and that must be infuriating for the big money people there.
Well, no, I can't imagine it. We've already heard through Bruce Feldman that apparently they are ready if they need to pay that buyout. Even though, just think about this, that buyout is not much less than what like Oklahoma and Texas each had to pay to like lead, or what they were originally going to have to pay to lead the Big 12.
Yeah.
And you're talking about that for one coach. But side note, before we move on, we talked about how we talked about this a lot